All right, this is Unit 6, Notes 2, Part 3. This time we are talking about the nuclear arms race. 4 years after the US dropped atomic bombs on Japan, the Soviet Union successfully tested its own atomic bomb. They had gotten information from spies who had helped work on America's top secret Manhattan Project. Suddenly, the world faced this threat of mass destruction if a war broke out between the superpowers. Americans became very concerned over the idea of Soviet spies living in the US. Many people were accused of being spies and investigated without any evidence. This trend was nicknamed the Red Scare. Many people who had ever attended a meeting where maybe alleged communists had gathered were suddenly under suspicion and investigated by the FBI. The United States also organized the House of Un-American Activities Department, and it was formed to hold trials for accused communists, like this one shown here. Not only were Americans afraid of communist spies, they worried about the threat of a nuclear attack. The US and Soviet Union were in a competition to develop and manufacture more and more powerful weapons. The arms race led to a stockpiling of bombs and missiles that were far more destructive than the atomic bombs used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. By 1961, both superpowers had enough nuclear weapons that they could destroy each other many times over. You can kind of see, here's a Fallout Shelter handbook, kind of a design of a squarish style fallout shelter, a nuclear kind of bomb shelter. There's some living space and the eating space, okay? And then there's like a hallway back here that leads to a set of maybe a ladder or something to get up and out. And it looks like back here there's more space behind it to have for sleeping, okay? In response, Americans lived with what we call nuclear anxiety. Public buildings were assigned to be nuclear fallout shelters. We talked about this in 6th grade, how schools would hold air raid drills, where it seems kind of silly to us now, but I think it was more about feeling that we were doing something instead of nothing to be prepared. So where students would hide under their desks as if that was going to protect them from a nuclear holocaust. Many families even built their own backyard bomb shelters in case of a nuclear attack. So write down in your notes, the arms race, the definition is a competition to develop and build stockpiles of powerful weapons. And air raid drills, Americans dealt with nuclear anxiety by practicing drills and building bomb shelters. During the nuclear arms race, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev had formed an alliance with the Cuban communist dictator Fidel Castro. There they are together. Khrushchev sent Soviet advisors and weapons to Cuba, which we later realize is pretty dangerous. In October of 1962, U.S. spy planes photographed secret missile bases for nuclear weapons that were being built by the Soviets in Cuba. Missiles launched from those bases could reach cities in the U.S. within minutes. So I know you can't hear this. This is some video footage of President John F. Kennedy responding to this and actually telling the U.S. Citizens of what was going on and what the U.S. had discovered. And he didn't release this right away out of just hope to keep people from panicking, but he did feel like the United States citizens needed to know this stuff. President Kennedy reacted with swift decisiveness. He demanded the Soviets remove the missile bases in Cuba. He declared any missile attack from Cuba that it would be seen as an attack by the Soviet Union. He ordered a U.S. naval blockade of Cuba to stop more missiles from arriving and have the military prepared in case the U.S. needed to go in and remove the missiles by force. The world was relieved after 6 days when Khrushchev removed the missiles from Cuba. So open your notes. Can you write down October 1962, Cuban President Fidel Castro was allied with Nikita Khrushchev, leader of the Soviet Union. U.S. planes spotted secret missile bases being built by the Soviets in Cuba. John F. Kennedy ordered a naval blockade to prevent Soviet ships from delivering any more missiles. So here's this episode of Happy Days. I don't know if you've ever heard of this show, but it was a popular show. In this specific episode, the Cunningham family the Cunningham family was thinking about building their own bomb shelter in their backyard. And Richie Cunningham, the son, kind of the main character in the show, um, some of his friends start to find out his family's going to do this, and they're all kind of bribing him and making him think about, ways to help get them and reserve their spot in his family's nuclear fallout shelter. And then they just kind of decide that, this is really a terrible thing, since some of his friends were starting to act like jerks to him because he didn't have room or permission to reserve their spot in his fallout shelter. And so he just basically tells his dad, is this even worth it? Is this stress and anxiety and, for something that may or may not ever even happen? So they kind of come to a family decision not to build the bomb shelter. So there's your spoiler alert. But you can maybe look for a way to watch that old episode if you've got access to some of those old shows. So what our assignment is for this in response is for you to plan out your bomb shelter. Okay, each of these squares on the second set of the worksheet, each of the squares is 10 square feet. So 1 square equals 10 square feet. That's actually really, really big. Okay, and remember, for every person you need 10 square feet available to them. You don't have to use this whole square to be your bomb shelter dimension. So you can draw within here, or you can use the whole square and decide how much who you're going to invite in. Here's your list of people you're going to allow in. The most people you can have are 10. Okay. You have to be able to store water, 32 ounces per person for 14 days. So however many people you have, you need 32 ounces times 14 times the number of people you have in your shelter. And then also that means that's how many ounces of water you're going to need to store away. I also want you to create a list of the food that you're going to store. Remember, you won't have access to a refrigerator, so these are going to have to be non-perishable. Okay, you might have an emergency generator or maybe gasoline-powered lighting, but you wouldn't have non-stop electricity, so things could go bad. Okay, you're allowed to bring 3 luxury or comfort items into your bomb shelter. You will not have electricity constantly for 14 days. So what 3 items can you live without that do not require constant electric use, okay? And then what will you miss while you are spending 14 days in the bomb shelter? Now that might be some of those electronic devices that you are not really going to be able to use on a regular basis. So there you go. And then make sure you draw out your bomb shelter, put the things where you have areas for sleeping, have areas for eating, and make sure that you've got the area we're going to store your water and your food. Okay, and then make sure that you turn that in. All right, have a great day. We'll catch you later where we'll talk about the 2 proxy wars that were fought during the Cold War.